The rain had settled into a soft pattern by the time Gregory Hayes pushed open the creaky glass door of Maggie's Diner, a warm, modest place nestled on the corner of a quiet street in Maple Ridge. The kind of diner that smelled like brewed coffee and fresh rolls, where locals read newspapers instead of checking their phones, and where the silence between customers was filled with memories rather than noise. Gregory didn't belong there. His tailored coat, polished shoes, and guarded eyes stood out like a crow among doves. But he wasn't there for a business meeting or a steak cooked to perfection. He was there for her. His daughter, Claire, sat in a sleek, custom wheelchair beside him, bundled in a soft pink coat with little white daisies. Her tiny hands curled faintly in her lap, her head tilted slightly to the side. Her gaze didn't meet his, or anyone's. Claire hadn't spoken in nearly 3 years, not since her mother's sudden passing left more than just silence in their home. It left an emptiness neither time nor therapy had touched. "Just a quiet corner, please," Gregory told the hostess softly, his voice polished but tired. She nodded, leading them toward a booth near the window. Gregory slid into the seat across from Claire and set down his leather gloves with a sigh. The room was filled with the sounds of silverware clinking and the low murmur of conversations. But to Gregory, it was all muted. He looked at his daughter, hoping, wishing for a flicker of recognition. Nothing. "Claire," he said gently, trying again. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" No answer, no eye contact, just the gentle rhythm of her fingers twitching against the seam of her coat. Gregory swallowed the ache rising in his throat. He could close million-dollar deals with a single phone call. He had taken companies from the brink of ruin to unimaginable success, but nothing in his entire empire made him feel more powerless than watching his little girl drift further away from the world around her. That's when a voice broke into his storm of thoughts. "Hi there, my name's Elena. I'll be taking care of y'all tonight." She had a southern lilt in her tone, soft but bright, like sunshine through a dusty curtain. Elena looked to be in her late 20s, her auburn hair tied back in a loose bun, a dusting of flour on her sleeve like she'd been helping in the back. Gregory looked up. Her smile was genuine, something rare these days. "I'll have the grilled chicken," he said quietly. "And for my daughter, maybe just the soup, something light." Elena's eyes flicked to Claire, and unlike most strangers, she didn't recoil. She didn't rush to pretend she hadn't noticed the wheelchair. Instead, her expression softened. "I'll bring out the homemade chicken noodle," she said kindly. "It's what my grandma used to make me when I was having a bad day." Gregory didn't say much after that. He just nodded, watching Elena disappear behind the swinging kitchen doors, unaware that in the next few minutes, everything in his life was about to change. The soup arrived a few minutes later, steaming gently in a wide white bowl, its golden broth fragrant with rosemary and thyme. Elena placed it in front of Claire with a tender care that made Gregory pause. Then she set the grilled chicken before him. "If either of y'all need anything else," she said, "just holler." But she didn't walk away. Instead, she lingered, her eyes on Claire, not with pity, but with curiosity and warmth. Gregory picked up the spoon and dipped it into the soup, gently bringing it to Claire's lips. "Let's try, sweetheart," he whispered. Before the spoon could reach her, Claire's hand jerked reflexively, knocking the spoon aside. It clattered against the plate, soup splashing onto the tablecloth. Gregory froze. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Years of trying to break through this wall had taught him that frustration only deepened the silence. "I'm sorry," he murmured, more to himself than to her. That's when Elena stepped forward. "May I?" she asked softly, motioning toward the spoon. Gregory looked up, startled. Most people would have awkwardly turned away, avoided involvement, but not her. He hesitated, then nodded. Elena pulled a napkin from her apron and gently wiped the spilled broth from the table. Then she knelt beside Claire's wheelchair, bringing herself to eye level. She didn't rush. She didn't speak loudly or slowly, like Claire couldn't understand. She just talked to her. "Hi there, Claire," she said gently. "That soup smells good, doesn't it? When I was little, my mama always said soup was like a hug you could taste." Gregory blinked. Elena dipped the spoon again, but didn't bring it to Claire right away. Instead, she spoke softly again. "I don't know if you like hugs," she said, "but maybe just a small one, just a taste." Then something happened, something Gregory hadn't seen in years. Claire's fingers twitched. Elena smiled, just a little. "That's a yes, isn't it?" She lifted the spoon again, this time more slowly, gently. Claire didn't pull away. The spoon touched her lips, and this time she opened them. A tiny sip. Then she swallowed. Gregory stared, breath caught in his throat. It was just soup, one spoonful, but to him it was like watching the sun rise after years of darkness. Then Claire looked at Elena, not past her, not through her, at her. And then, God help him, she smiled. It was faint, fragile, but it was real. And it cracked something wide open in Gregory's chest. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. The room seemed to blur around the edges, sound falling away. It was like time had stopped. Elena's voice brought him back. She's really sweet, she said, not looking at him. She just needs someone to see her. Gregory's throat was tight. How did you do that? Elena glanced at him then, her expression unreadable, but kind. I didn't do anything special, she said. I just talked to her, like a kid who matters. Gregory had nothing to say to that. For the first time in years, he had no answer, no counter, no way to rationalize what just happened. All he could feel was hope. The city lights flickered outside the window of Gregory Hayes's penthouse apartment, but inside the room, only the dim glow of a desk lamp kept the darkness at bay. The room was a study in contrast: sleek leather furniture, polished mahogany bookshelves, walls lined with fine art. But the man seated at the desk felt like he no longer belonged in that world. Gregory swirled the amber liquid in his glass but didn't drink it. He stared at the untouched whiskey as if it held answers. Claire had smiled. He replayed it in his mind again. Not imagined, not wished for. It had happened. A single sip of soup, a simple moment of kindness from a diner waitress. And Claire had smiled. That smile was haunting him. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling, his throat tight. He had paid for the best: neurologists, speech therapists, cognitive specialists, all of them brilliant, all of them well-credentialed, and none of them had ever reached Claire. But Elena had done it with nothing but gentleness and a bowl of soup. Gregory rubbed his face with both hands. For a man who had once negotiated billion-dollar contracts without breaking a sweat, he now felt completely out of his depth. He reached for his phone. Call Daniel, he muttered to the smart assistant. The phone rang twice before a calm male voice answered. Mr. Hayes? Daniel, I need you to look into someone for me. There was a pause. A potential business partner? No, Gregory said. A waitress. The silence on the other end stretched a little longer this time. I see, Daniel replied diplomatically. Name? Elena Bell, Gregory said, almost hesitating over it. She works the dinner shift at Rosie's Diner on Elm Street. I need to know everything. Where she's from, where she went to school, what she left behind. Understood. Discreetly? Yes, very. Gregory ended the call and set the phone down, exhaling slowly. His hands trembled slightly. He wasn't used to feeling this uncertain, especially about a stranger. But something in Elena's eyes had stayed with him. There was a sadness there, carefully tucked behind her smile. A history she never spoke aloud. And more than that, a truth. She had looked at Claire and seen her. Not as broken, not as fragile, just seen. That night, Gregory didn't sleep. The image of Claire's small smile haunted him long after the city fell quiet. It felt like the beginning of something, and that terrified him even more than the silence had. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as Gregory pulled into the parking lot of Rosie's Diner for the second time that week. The black Mercedes he drove looked painfully out of place next to rusted pickups and dusty sedans, but he didn't care. He wasn't here for business. Not the kind he was used to. The moment he stepped through the glass door, the same bell above the entrance chimed. Its sound softer this time. Maybe because Gregory's heart was pounding loud enough to drown out everything else. The diner was quieter than it had been that first night. A few regulars nursed their coffee at the counter. A couple of teenagers whispered over a shared milkshake in a corner booth. But Elena was there. She was wiping down a table near the window, her movements tired but focused. A stray curl had escaped from the clip in her hair and bounced gently against her cheek with every motion. Gregory watched her for a moment, unsure how to begin. When she finally looked up and saw him, her body tensed, just a fraction. Mr. Hayes, she said, straightening. Back again? He gave a small nod. May I speak with you? Privately. Elena glanced toward the kitchen. I'm still on my shift. It won't take long, he promised. Something in his voice, perhaps the same raw edge she'd heard when he whispered to Claire, made her sigh and motion for him to follow. They stepped outside into the narrow alley behind the diner, where the hum of the kitchen fan mingled with the chirping of early evening birds. Elena crossed her arms. Is Claire okay? She's more than okay, Gregory said quietly. She smiled at me last night. Elena's brow furrowed. She's beautiful when she smiles. Gregory's throat tightened. I haven't seen that smile in almost 2 years. Not since my wife passed. There was a pause, one filled with unsaid things and distant echoes of grief. Elena didn't interrupt. I wanted to thank you, Gregory continued, but that didn't feel like enough. She shook her head gently. You don't need to thank me, Mr. Hayes. Claire just needed someone to speak to her like she mattered. She does matter, Gregory said quickly, almost defensively. More than anything, I just don't know how to reach her. Elena softened. You love her. That's a start. Gregory looked away, the next words coming out slower, heavier. I've hired therapists, specialists, some of the best in the world, but none of them got through to her. Not until you. She said nothing. He stepped closer, his voice firm. I want to offer you a job. Elena blinked. What? Come work for me, he said, as Claire's companion, her caregiver, her whatever she needs you to be. You saw something in her I haven't seen in years. She responded to you, and I need to know why. Elena looked stunned. Mr. Hayes, I'm just a waitress. I'm not a therapist or a nurse. You're more than that, he said softly. And I don't think you ended up at that table by accident. Her jaw tensed. I can't. Why not? Because I've already lost one child I couldn't save, she said, her voice breaking. And I don't think I can survive losing another. Gregory didn't move, didn't blink. I'm not asking you to save Claire, Elena. I'm asking you to be with her. Just be there. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't understand. I don't, he admitted. But maybe you don't have to carry it all alone. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the alley. And then finally, Elena whispered the words he hadn't dared to hope for. 1 week, she said. That's all I can promise. Gregory nodded slowly. That's all I'm asking. The wrought iron gates of the Hayes estate creaked open slowly as Elena's modest car pulled through. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Her heart pounded so loud she could feel it in her throat. This wasn't the world she belonged to. Towering columns rose before her as she parked near the circular driveway. The house, no, the mansion, was bathed in morning light, its grand windows reflecting the sun like mirrors. Everything looked pristine, cold, untouched, like a photograph in a glossy magazine. But there were no sounds of laughter, no warm greetings, no scent of pancakes or coffee or life, just stillness. Gregory met her at the front steps, dressed impeccably in a tailored navy suit, as if he'd just stepped off the cover of Forbes. But his eyes, those same tired, ocean-colored eyes, carried the weight of every sleepless night. You're early, he said. You said 8 a.m., Elena replied softly. I'm not used to people being on time, he muttered, then stepped aside. Come in. The house swallowed her in silence. Every footstep echoed. Every hallway was wide and sterile, like a museum no one lived in. Marble floors, polished banisters, not a toy in sight. This way, Gregory said. He led her past a living room with furniture too elegant to be sat on, into a long hallway with tall windows on one side and a series of closed doors on the other. At the end was a double door slightly ajar. Gregory paused outside it. She's in here. He pushed the door open gently, revealing a room filled with soft pastels and sunlight. It was the only space in the house that felt like someone had tried to make it feel warm. And there, near the window, sat Claire. She was in a pale blue dress, her tiny legs tucked under a blanket, her body slouched slightly in her chair. A stuffed giraffe was propped on the windowsill, looking out over the garden. Claire didn't turn her head, didn't look up, didn't react. Elena stepped inside slowly. Good morning, she said softly, her voice as delicate as the light filtering through the curtains. Claire didn't respond. Gregory lingered in the doorway. She hasn't spoken since her mother passed. She eats when she's prompted, sleeps with help, but mostly she just watches. Elena nodded slowly, feeling that familiar ache return to her chest. Can I try? He hesitated, then nodded once and stepped out, quietly closing the door behind him. Elena walked over and knelt beside the chair. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she just sat there, watching the garden alongside the little girl. A butterfly flitted across the window pane. Elena smiled softly. Pretty, isn't it? Claire didn't respond, but her fingers, resting in her lap, shifted slightly. Elena reached into her bag and pulled out a small book with faded edges and a paperclip keeping a page marked. My favorite story when I was your age, she murmured, about a rabbit who couldn't find her way home. Still no response. But when Elena began to read, her voice quiet and calm, Claire's fingers twitched again. Later that day, Elena tried helping Claire with a puzzle. The child didn't touch the pieces, but she didn't turn away either. At lunch, Elena offered her a spoonful of soup, and while Claire didn't take it, she didn't flinch this time. Small things, tiny, almost invisible things, but they were signs. By the time Gregory checked in that evening, Elena was still seated by Claire's side, telling a story about stars who watched over people they loved. How did it go? He asked, leaning in the doorway. Elena looked up, brushing hair from her face. Quiet, but not empty. Gregory blinked. What does that mean? It means she's listening, Elena said. She may not be ready to speak or laugh or eat on her own, but she hears, she sees, she feels. Gregory nodded slowly, his voice a whisper. Then there's hope. Elena looked back at Claire, who had dozed off with her hand resting gently against the spine of the rabbit book. Yes, she said, there's always hope. The week unfolded like the first hint of spring after a long, bitter winter. Each morning, Elena arrived promptly at 8 a.m., and each time Gregory would meet her at the front door, coffee already in hand. At first, the exchanges were brief, formal, just schedules, notes, reminders, but something began to shift. Claire started reaching out. It was on the third day when Elena brought a sketch pad and crayons. She had laid them out gently on the table in Claire's room, speaking casually as she always did, never expecting too much, just offering. I thought maybe today the rabbit from the story could go on a new adventure, she said with a soft smile, but I don't know where it should go. She turned to gather a blanket, and when she looked back, Claire had a crayon in hand, a faint pink one. She was slowly, carefully making small circles on the page. Lena's breath caught in her throat. She didn't say anything, just sat beside the little girl and began coloring in silence, side by side, as if they'd been doing this for years. By the fourth day, Claire began making eye contact, just fleeting glances, but real, intentional. On the fifth day, she touched Elena's hand gently, her small fingers curling around her thumb as they read together. Elena almost cried, and in the quiet, something else began to unfold, something between Elena and Gregory. It was subtle at first. He lingered longer in the room during sessions. He watched the two of them with a softness Elena hadn't seen before. And once, during an afternoon walk in the garden, when Claire pointed, a real deliberate point, at a blooming magnolia, both adults turned to each other in amazement. You saw that, right? Gregory asked. Elena laughed, her joy bubbling up like spring water. She's coming back to you. Gregory didn't answer right away. He looked at Elena, his expression unreadable. No, he said finally. She's coming back because of you. That night, after Claire had gone to sleep and the house was still, Gregory invited Elena to stay for dinner. She hesitated the way someone does when they're used to leaving before the silence gets too loud. But eventually, she nodded. They sat at a small round table in the sunroom, warm light casting golden shadows across the floor. It's been a long time since we had anyone stay past sunset, Gregory admitted, swirling the wine in his glass. Elena smiled faintly. It's been a long time since anyone invited me. Gregory watched her for a moment. You don't talk much about yourself. Elena shrugged. There's not much to tell. I doubt that. She looked away, chewing her lip. I used to be a teacher, special needs, before my father got sick. Gregory's voice lowered. and now you're a waitress. Elena chuckled. Not exactly a fairy tale, huh? He leaned forward, his voice gentle. I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. Elena's heart ached at the words. It had been so long since someone saw her, really saw her. You don't know me, she said softly. I'm starting to, Gregory replied, and I'd like to know more. They sat in the dim light for a while longer, the silence between them no longer awkward, but full of unspoken things, of possibilities. That night, as Elena drove home under the velvet sky, she pressed a hand to her chest. It felt too full, too much. She had come here for a She hadn't expected to find this feeling again. She hadn't expected to find him. Elena didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, arms wrapped around her pillow, staring at the ceiling in the dark. The quiet hum of the fridge, the creak of the old floorboards, sounds she used to find comforting, now felt too loud, too sharp. Her chest ached, not from illness, but from something deeper. Something she hadn't let herself feel in years. She was falling. Not just for Claire, who had crawled into her heart with those soft glances and brave little gestures, but for Gregory too. The quiet strength in his voice, the vulnerability in his eyes, the way he smiled like he'd forgotten how but was relearning, just for her. And that terrified her, because Elena knew better than anyone what love could take from you. She had watched her father wither away day by day, the strongest man she knew reduced to silence and shadows. She had sacrificed everything for him, her education, her career, even friendships. And when he finally slipped away, she was left with nothing but empty rooms and unpaid bills. She had vowed never to feel that helpless again, never to love someone so deeply that losing them would hollow her out. And yet, here she was, letting herself hope, letting herself dream. It was dangerous. The next morning, she arrived at the Carter estate wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Claire greeted her with a soft sound, almost a hum, and reached up for her hand. Elena knelt and kissed the girl's forehead, but her heart wasn't in it, not fully. Gregory noticed. He stood at the kitchen island, a mug of coffee in hand, brows furrowed. You're quiet today. Elena busied herself arranging the sensory toys on the table. Just tired. He didn't push, but his eyes lingered, watching, waiting. Throughout the day, she kept her distance. She did her job. She laughed when appropriate. She encouraged Claire gently. But she didn't stay for dinner. She didn't linger in the sunroom. She didn't sing. That night, Gregory texted her a simple message. You okay? She stared at it for a long time before replying. Just tired. See you tomorrow. But tomorrow didn't come. She called early, voice shaky. I need a day off. Just today. Gregory's voice on the other end was soft. Of course. Take what you need. And she spent the day pacing her tiny apartment, haunted by what she was walking away from. A chance at something real. Something good. But her fear was louder. That night, she sat on her porch, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She thought of Claire, of the progress they had made, of her small hands reaching out, her laughter like music. And she thought of Gregory, the way his voice dropped when he spoke of his late wife, the way his eyes warmed when Claire made the smallest step forward, the way he looked at Elena, not with expectation, but with gratitude, with hope. She felt it again, that ache, that pull. But instead of leaning in, she whispered into the night, I can't do this. Because love meant risk, and Elena had lost too much already. Gregory stood at the large window of the sunroom, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor. His coffee had gone cold in his hands, untouched. He watched Claire play quietly on her mat, her toys scattered around her like fallen stars. But Elena was not beside her. Not today. Not yesterday either. Something was wrong. Something had shifted. She had pulled away, and Gregory, who had once spent his entire life ignoring his feelings, now felt the absence like a missing rib. He thought about calling, about texting again, about pretending like nothing had changed, but he couldn't, because something had changed. The front doorbell rang around sunset. He opened it to find Elena standing there, arms wrapped around herself, a bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes were tired, rimmed red, like she'd been fighting back tears for hours. Hey, she said softly. Hey. His voice was low, careful. She looked past him into the house. Is she okay? He nodded. She's been asking for you. Elena winced, her chin trembling slightly. I shouldn't have left like that. Gregory stepped aside, silently motioning her in. They moved to the kitchen, familiar ground, neutral space. She didn't sit. Neither did he. I'm sorry, she said again, voice shaking now. Gregory placed his mug on the counter, his eyes never leaving hers. You don't have to apologize. I just need to understand. Elena swallowed hard. I got scared. He nodded slowly. Of me? No, of how this is starting to feel. Of her, of you, of the idea that this might be real. She turned away, arms tightening around her torso. I lost someone once, someone I loved more than anything. My dad. He was sick for years, and I poured every piece of myself into caring for him. I gave up everything, school, friends, a future, and when he was gone, there was nothing left of me. Her voice cracked. I promised myself I'd never let that happen again. I promised I'd never get that close to anyone, because losing them. She broke off. Gregory's voice was barely a whisper. I understand, Vanden. Elena turned surprised. His eyes were glistening. I know what it's like to lose someone. My wife, Claire's mother, was my compass. She made sense of the chaos. And when she died, I didn't think I could be a father. I didn't think I deserved to be. He took a careful step forward. But then you came in and you saw Claire, not as a burden, not as a broken little girl, but as a child worth loving. And she saw you too. He hesitated. And I did. I see you, Elena. Not as a savior, not as someone I need to fill a void. I see you strong, compassionate, flawed, and beautiful. Tears welled in Elena's eyes. But what if I fail you? What if I fail her? Gregory reached out slowly, cupping her hand with both of his. You already haven't. You've given her something I couldn't. You gave her safety. You gave her laughter. You gave us both something we didn't know we could feel again. He paused. You gave us hope. Elena's walls trembled. I don't know if I'm ready, she whispered. That's okay, Gregory said gently. I'll wait. Just don't run. Not from this. Not from us. She looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, she didn't see a millionaire or a grieving man. She saw someone just as broken, just as scared, just as desperate to believe that second chances were real. She took a deep breath. I'll stay. The morning after their conversation, something changed. Not in the world, but in the way Elena carried herself through it. She arrived early, earlier than usual, wearing a soft gray sweater and faded jeans. Her hair was tied in a loose braid, and her arms were full. Books, art supplies, a little toy frog that croaked when you squeezed it. Claire had once giggled at a similar one in the store. Today, Elena wasn't just clocking in to do a job. She was arriving for a little girl who had cracked open her heart, and a man who had touched it without even trying. Claire lit up when she saw her. Lena, the little voice squeaked, limbs wiggling with delight. Elena knelt and opened her arms wide, and Claire practically threw herself into them. Gregory stood back, watching the scene unfold, the knot in his chest loosening. He hadn't known just how badly he needed this, needed her, until he saw the two people he loved most wrapped in a quiet kind of joy. The next few weeks felt like a dream. Elena created routines that gently nudged Claire forward. Sensory play in the mornings, nature walks in the afternoon, music therapy in the evening. Sometimes Gregory joined, fumbling with tambourines or reading books with exaggerated voices that made Claire burst into fits of laughter. And Elena? Elena watched him with something new in her eyes, something tender, something unspoken but growing stronger each day. One night after Claire had fallen asleep, her hand curled around the frog toy Elena had brought, they found themselves on the back patio again. Gregory handed her a cup of tea, their fingers brushing just long enough to send a quiet charge through both of them. You're incredible with her, he said softly. She's easy to love, Elena replied, gazing out at the stars. So are you, Gregory murmured. Elena looked at him, her heart thudding. This time she didn't pull away. And in the hush of that evening, something passed between them. Not just romance, but a shared understanding. A knowing that broken people could heal each other. That love wasn't always grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it was sitting quietly beside someone, while the world turned softly around them. Sometimes it was realizing you weren't alone anymore. Gregory had always been a man of caution, calculated risks in business, guarded emotions in life. He was the type to build a wall before he ever dared to open a door. But lately, that wall had started to crumble. Because of her, because of Elena. It started in the smallest moments. The way she tucked Claire's hair behind her ear with gentle fingers, or how her voice lit up when she read bedtime stories, bringing fairy tales to life. It was in the way Claire responded to her, like a flower turning to the sun. And maybe if he was honest, Gregory had started turning to her too. One night, after a long day filled with laughter, art projects, and a sticky-fingered kitchen experiment involving sugar cookies, he stood in the doorway and watched Elena humming to herself as she wiped flour from Claire's nose. He felt it then. A swell in his chest, quiet but undeniable. He was in love with her. Not just admiration. Not just gratitude. Love. The kind that scared him. The kind that made him feel 17 again and 60 all at once. The kind that felt like coming home. That night, as Claire slept with a smile still lingering on her lips, Gregory sat at his desk and stared at a velvet box that had been tucked away for years. It had belonged to his late wife, a keepsake he'd never found the heart to part with. Inside was a ring. Not flashy or ostentatious, just simple, elegant, timeless. A symbol of forever. He closed the lid, but the idea had taken root. Not a proposal, not yet, but a beginning. The next morning, while Elena was preparing breakfast and Claire was preoccupied with drawing pictures of Miss Lena and Daddy Gregory, he made a call. Quietly, carefully. And within days, the plan was in motion. He wanted to show Elena something. No, give her something that wasn't wrapped in gold or glittering promises. He wanted to give her a choice. A small two-story cottage at the edge of the estate grounds. Once a guest house, now empty and unused. Gregory had it clean, painted, repaired. He filled it with warmth, fluffy cushions, fresh flowers, and a bookshelf filled with the titles Elena had mentioned loving. In the kitchen, he placed the first edition cookbook she'd once laughed about never affording, and on the counter a note, handwritten in his careful, neat script. Elena, this isn't a job offer, it's a home. A safe place, not just for Claire, but for you. I don't expect anything in return. I just want you to know you're not alone anymore. You never have to be again. Gregory, he stood back as the last beam of sunlight stretched across the wooden floor, and for the first time in years, Gregory Carter felt nervous, because this time it wasn't about strategy, it was about heart, and he had just laid his completely bare. The sun had just begun to dip beneath the horizon, casting a golden glow over the estate. Elena walked down the gravel path Gregory had told her about earlier, her boots crunching softly beneath her. A small surprise, he'd said with that mysterious gleam in his eye. She hadn't expected much, maybe a flower bed, a fresh set of paints for Claire. But what she found made her stop in her tracks. The cottage looked like something pulled from the pages of a dream. Cozy, warm, welcoming. Light spilled from the windows like it had been waiting for her. She opened the door, heart racing, and stepped inside. The scent of fresh paint and wildflowers wrapped around her like a memory. Every corner held something soft, something thoughtful, a space created with care and attention. On the small wooden table near the fireplace sat a note, his handwriting, unmistakable. She read it once, then twice, and by the third time her vision blurred. He had done this for her, not as an employer, not as a favor, but because he cared, because he saw her, not just as a caregiver or a helper, but as someone who mattered, someone worth building a home for. Elena sank onto the couch, the letter still trembling in her hands. But along with the warmth came a sharp sting of fear. She had been here before, loved deeply, trusted completely, and had lost everything. After her sister died, after the courts took Claire away, Elena had sworn to never let herself believe in permanence again. Love for her had always come with an expiration date. What if this was just another chapter waiting to close? She heard Claire's voice in her mind, sweet, innocent. Miss Lena, do you think homes can have hearts? This cottage, Gregory's kindness. Even the way Claire reached for her hand at night, it felt like a heart. It beat in the quiet moments. It ached in her hesitation, and suddenly she was afraid of how much she wanted it. She stood and paced the small space, the letter clenched in her hand. Her breath came fast, too fast. Don't trust it, the old voice in her mind whispered. Don't need it, don't hope. But another voice, softer, newer, one that sounded like Claire, said, you deserve to be loved too. She sat back down and stared at the note. It wasn't a proposal, it wasn't pressure, it was just an open door. And all she had to do was walk through it. Elena didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of the bed in the cottage Gregory had prepared for her, his letter clutched to her chest. Her mind ran in circles, memories of her sister's final moments, the echo of Claire's laughter, and Gregory's steady voice telling her she mattered. By morning, she had made her decision. She had to talk to him, not as Claire's caregiver, not as a guest in his home, but as herself. A woman carrying the weight of grief, the ache of loneliness, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, love could bloom again. She found him in the conservatory, kneeling beside a pot of late-season violets, his boim, his sleeves rolled up, dirt on his palms. He looked up, surprised, when he saw her standing there. Elena, he said with a smile, I was just about to. I read your note, she interrupted, voice trembling, but strong. I saw the cottage. It's beautiful. Everything is. Gregory stood slowly, brushing the soil from his hands. I meant what I wrote. I know, she whispered, taking a step closer. That's why I'm here. He waited, saying nothing, but his eyes never left hers. I've never had something like this, Gregory. Not really. My sister and Claire, they were my whole world. And when I lost my sister, I told myself I'd never get attached again. Never let myself hope. She swallowed hard. But you and Claire, you're making me break that promise. Elena, Gregory said gently, you don't have to promise anything. Not to me, not yet. I just want you to feel safe here, to know you don't have to keep running. I'm tired of running, she admitted, but I'm scared. His voice softened even more. So am I. She blinked. I lost my wife and felt like the world stopped turning, he continued, stepping closer. But you came into our lives and somehow reminded me that there's still light in the world, that laughter can return, that love doesn't die, it waits, sometimes quietly, sometimes stubbornly. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't expect anything from you, Elena, he said, his voice just above a whisper. But if you're willing to let us in, to let me in, I promise I'll never give you a reason to regret it. She reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. And for the first time in years, she felt grounded, seen, cherished. I don't know how to do this, she said quietly. Gregory smiled. We'll learn together. And there, between the potted violets and the soft rays of morning sunlight, something shifted, two wounded hearts choosing to move forward. Not with grand declarations, but with the kind of quiet understanding that builds a foundation stronger than fear. It was late, the kind of night when silence feels heavier, and the stars seem to lean closer. Inside the quiet warmth of the cottage, the fireplace crackled softly, casting a golden glow across the small living room. Elena sat curled up on the couch, a thick blanket around her shoulders. Across from her, Gregory nursed a cup of tea, his expression thoughtful, eyes distant, like he was trying to find the words he hadn't spoken in years. I haven't really talked about her in a long time, he began, his voice low and steady. My wife, that is, Margaret. Elena said nothing, just nodded, encouraging him gently with her silence. She was brilliant, he continued, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Kind, witty, she could walk into a room and make everyone feel like they belonged there. Claire was only 4 when we lost her. She barely remembers. Elena's eyes softened. What happened? Breast cancer, he said quietly. Aggressive. We fought hard, but it wasn't enough. And when she passed, I shut down. Completely. I didn't know how to be a father without her. I didn't know how to be without her. His hand tightened around the teacup. I hired caregivers, nannies, therapists, but no one stayed long. Not until you. Elena felt a lump rise in her throat. She reached over and gently touched his hand. I'm so sorry, she whispered. He looked at her, eyes shimmering in the firelight. She told me before she died. She said, "Don't let your grief steal Claire's childhood. Let her laugh. Let her live." And I promised her I would, but I didn't. Not really. Until you came. Elena swallowed hard. Her voice trembled as she spoke. My sister, Olivia, she was my whole world. Gregory sat forward, listening, fully present. We grew up with just each other. When she had Claire, I moved in with them, helped raise her while Olivia finished nursing school. She was the strongest person I knew. Her voice cracked. Then the accident happened. A car ran a red light. Claire survived. Olivia didn't. Gregory reached out, gently clasping her hand. I remember holding Claire in my arms in the hospital, Elena continued, her eyes distant. She was so small, so broken, and I just kept thinking, how can I keep going without her? How can I keep Claire going? You did, Gregory said softly. You didn't just keep going, Elena. You kept her safe. You gave her love. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I never felt like it was enough. Gregory reached up, brushing a tear away with his thumb. It was, and it is. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. The wind whispered against the windows. And in the quiet, something beautiful happened. Two people who had known profound loss sat together and gave each other the gift of being fully seen. No masks, no roles, no walls. Just scars, stories, and the courage to share them. The invitation came on a crisp autumn afternoon, tucked into a pale blue envelope, resting quietly on the kitchen counter. Elena picked it up, brow furrowed as she turned it over. Open it, Gregory said with a gentle smile, stepping into the room, hands tucked into the pockets of his navy blazer. She did, and found a gold-embossed card inside. It read, Annual Children's Wellness Gala, in support of pediatric medical research. Formal attire required. I'm on the board, Gregory said casually, and every year I donate through Claire's foundation. Elena blinked. This is fancy. He smiled again, sheepishly this time. It is, but I want you there, with me. Her heart skipped. With you? She asked, voice careful. Gregory nodded, stepping closer. You've done more for Claire in a few weeks than any doctor or therapist has in years. You've changed things. And I want people to meet the woman who helped bring my daughter back to life. Elena looked down at the invitation again, her stomach fluttering. This wasn't just a job anymore. That line had blurred the moment she'd seen Claire smile, really smile for the first time. And now Gregory was asking her to step into his world, not as an employee, but as something else, something more. That Saturday evening, Elena stood in front of the mirror, smoothing out the soft folds of a midnight blue gown borrowed from a friend. It shimmered in the light like still water under a moonlit sky. Her hair was pinned loosely, her makeup subtle, elegant. When she stepped out of her room, Gregory was waiting near the stairs. The moment he looked up, his breath visibly caught in his chest. Elena, he whispered, eyes wide. You look... Her cheeks flushed. I feel a little out of place, to be honest. You don't have to. He offered his arm. You belong right beside me. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of an old heritage hotel, the kind of place with high ceilings, sweeping chandeliers, and waiters in white gloves gliding silently across the polished floors. As they entered, heads turned, not because of Gregory, who was well known in this circle, but because of the woman on his arm. When they reached their table, Gregory made no speeches, gave no elaborate introduction. But when someone leaned in to ask, is she your date? He didn't flinch. He simply smiled and said, she's very important to me. Throughout the evening, Elena found herself swept into small conversations, surprised at how gracefully she navigated the glittering world of millionaires and philanthropists. Gregory stayed close, his hand occasionally brushing against hers, his gaze lingering too long between shared laughs. And when the music swelled and couples began to drift onto the dance floor, he turned to her, his voice low. May I have this dance? She hesitated, but only for a moment. Under the glow of golden light, they danced slowly, the world melting away as Gregory's hand found the small of her back, and her head came to rest gently against his chest. No words were needed. In that quiet, swaying moment, Their hearts said what their lips had not yet dared to. The warmth of the evening had settled into Elena's skin like sunlight on her soul. After the dance, she and Gregory had returned to their table, his hand resting protectively on hers. It felt like the start of something real. But not everyone was pleased. From across the ballroom, Marissa DeWitt, an old acquaintance of Gregory's and a fellow donor, had been watching with narrowed eyes. She was all elegance and ice, wrapped in a shimmering silver gown that barely concealed the simmering disdain beneath her smile. At first, Elena thought it was in her head, the glances, the murmurs, the polite smiles with two sharp edges. But as Gregory stepped away briefly to speak with the event organizer, Marissa made her move. "Well, well," Marissa said, appearing at the edge of Elena's table like a storm cloud. "You clean up nicely." Elena looked up, surprised. "Excuse me?" Marissa gave a tight smile. "I mean, it's impressive, considering your background. Gregory's always had a soft spot for charity projects, but this?" She let her eyes sweep over Elena's dress, her hair. "This is a bold one." Elena's fingers tightened slightly around her wine glass. "I'm not sure I follow." "Oh, darling," Marissa leaned in, voice low and syrupy. "Don't take this the wrong way, but you're temporary. All this?" She gestured around the ballroom. "It's not your world. It never will be. Enjoy the attention while it lasts." The sting of humiliation spread through Elena's chest like fire. The words weren't loud, but sharp enough to draw curious glances from nearby tables. She didn't know what to say. Not here, not with so many eyes, but she didn't have to. A soft voice, clear and ringing like a bell, cut through the air. "She belongs here." Heads turned. Claire Carter stood near the table, dressed in a white satin dress with a pale pink sash. Her thin arms trembled slightly as she gripped the back of a chair, but her eyes, those bright, intelligent eyes, were unwavering. "She belongs with us," Claire said again, louder this time. Marissa blinked, taken aback. "Claire, sweetheart, I was just—" "No, you weren't," Claire interrupted, her voice trembling, but strong. "You were being mean to someone who's kind, who helped me eat again, who reads to me when I'm scared, who sings to me when I can't sleep." The room had gone completely silent. Claire turned to look at Elena. "She makes Daddy laugh again, and me too." Gregory, who had just returned, froze behind his daughter, hearing every word. His eyes were wide, lips parted in astonishment. Claire stepped closer to Elena, reaching for her hand. "She's not temporary," she said softly. "She's family." A hush fell over the entire ballroom. Marissa, flustered, muttered something about needing to check on someone, and swiftly disappeared into the crowd. Gregory stepped forward, placing a steady hand on Claire's shoulder. His eyes found Elena's, and for a moment, nothing existed outside of that gaze. Elena knelt slowly, eye level with Claire, tears burning in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. Claire smiled, just a little. "You helped me. I wanted to help you back." Gregory bent down, kissed the top of his daughter's head, then looked at Elena. "I should have said it before," he said, his voice low and filled with meaning. "But I see it now, what she sees, what I feel." And with everyone watching, he gently took Elena's hand and didn't let go. Time, like a slow and steady stream, carried them from that unforgettable gala night into the everyday rhythms of a new life together. What began as a fragile connection in a quiet corner of a noisy diner grew into something deeper, something Elena never dared to believe she could have again. A home not built from bricks and marble, but from trust, laughter, and long, quiet conversations by firelight. Gregory's mansion didn't feel so large anymore. Claire's laughter echoed off the walls, her drawings filled the refrigerator door, and Elena's voice, soft and melodic, wove through the halls like a familiar song. The rooms no longer echoed with silence but pulsed with warmth. Still, love wasn't without its growing pains. There were hard days, days when Claire regressed, when the world overwhelmed her, days when Elena doubted her place, when the whispers of Marissa's cruel words would echo back in her thoughts. "You'll never belong." But Gregory always saw it, the way she sat at Claire's bedside through every fever, every night terror. The way she left little notes in Claire's lunchbox with hand-drawn hearts and silly jokes. The way she calmed Gregory's own storms just by being near. He found himself falling in love with her slowly, then all at once. And Elena, she learned to let herself be loved again. On a golden autumn morning, they sat on the back patio with mugs of coffee steaming in their hands. Claire was off at a therapy session, the garden around them painted in shades of amber and crimson. Gregory watched Elena tuck a strand of hair behind her ear as she read aloud from a book. Some whimsical story Claire had begged them to finish. Her voice danced over the words, and something in his chest swelled with quiet certainty. "Marry me," he said suddenly, not even realizing he'd spoken aloud. Elena paused. "What?" He smiled. "I said marry me." She blinked, stunned. "Gregory, I don't have a ring yet," he admitted sheepishly. "I wanted to wait until everything was perfect. But the truth is it's already perfect with you." She set the book down slowly, her hands trembling. "Are you sure?" "More sure than I've ever been. I want a life with you, with Claire, with all the chaos and beauty that comes with it." Tears welled in her eyes. "I never thought I'd get this kind of happiness again," she whispered. "I thought it died with Michael." Gregory stood, walked around the table and knelt in front of her. "I'm not replacing him, Elena. I'm just asking if I can be part of your story now. Our story." She nodded, one hand covering her mouth, the other reaching for him. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Gregory." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, and for a long while they didn't say anything at all. They didn't need to. Love had already spoken. The air was soft with the perfume of spring flowers. Gentle sunshine spilled through the leaves of an old oak tree, casting dappled shadows over rows of white chairs arranged in the garden. It was a modest ceremony by Gregory Langford's standards. No golden chandeliers or gilded staircases, no guest list full of billionaires and aristocrats. Just family, close friends, and love. Claire stood at the edge of the aisle in a pale ivory dress with a satin sash that matched the lilacs in her bouquet. A small crown of baby's breath rested atop her curls. She clutched Elena's hand in one, Gregory's in the other. Her eyes sparkled, not with fear or confusion, but joy, the kind that had taken years to surface. As the first chords of a gentle piano melody drifted into the garden, the guests turned. But it wasn't the bride they looked for. It was Claire. She took her first step forward, her parents beside her. It wasn't just a moment, it was a triumph. Once unable to eat without help, now she walked on steady legs. Once locked behind a wall of silence, now she giggled at her own steps and beamed up at Elena and Gregory. This was her day too. Elena's dress was simple, timeless, lace-trimmed and flowing, the kind that made her look like she'd stepped out of a dream. Gregory wore a navy blue suit, no tie, his eyes never leaving Elena's. They walked slowly together, three hearts becoming one. At the altar, an older minister smiled gently. "This is not a story about beginnings," he said. "It's about finding your way back to love after loss, about second chances, about family, not the one you're born into, but the one you build with kindness, with courage, and with patience." The vows were not elaborate. No poetry, no sweeping metaphors, just truth. "I don't promise to be perfect," Gregory said, his voice unsteady, "but I promise to try. I promise to show up every single day. For you, for Claire, for us." Elena's voice trembled as she spoke. "I thought love had left me behind," she said softly. "But you taught me that it never truly goes. It just waits for us to find it again. And when I couldn't believe in miracles, you both became mine." They didn't need to be told to kiss. Gregory pulled her close and Claire clapped loudly, drawing laughter from the crowd. Her laugh, so pure, so unfiltered, rang louder than the music. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the past, not the scars, not the fears, only love. Real, hard-earned, resilient love. Later that evening, under twinkling fairy lights and the glow of candles, Elena looked around at their guests, then back at Gregory and Claire dancing, his tie loose, her feet stepping on his shoes. She whispered to herself, This is home. Because sometimes family isn't built through blood. It's built through sacrifice, through tears wiped away in the quiet, through meals shared and songs sung at bedtime and hands held through storms. It's built through love, the kind that survives the worst days and blooms on the best ones.